to everyone that has joined us. Welcome from sunny Barcelona. It's not really true because it's raining, but yeah, welcome to this shared talk. In the next 20 minutes, Vilash and I will attempt at explaining and demonstrating micro frontends to the best of our ability. And I'm going to speak quite fast because he has a more practical demonstration and I want him to have enough time. So if I go way too fast, you know that you can ask any questions in the Q&A and then we'll try to respond as soon as possible. So micro frontends are the hot topic right now, and in the frontend spheres particularly, everybody talks about them. Everyone claims to have the right recipe to implement them, but do we need them? That's one of the questions. What kind of problems do they solve, right? Micro frontends, just like the backend casting microservices, are a type of architecture solution that solves a very, very specific problem, or a few of them, but introduce quite a few problems or questions as well. So one of the largest problems that these patterns aim to solve is that of independent deployability of certain parts of a system. And what do I mean by that? I am sure that you working at Netcentric have come across this situation multiple times when there is a feature that is hardly ever maintained in your AEM project. And then there is another one that is constantly being developed or extended, and it has more or less of a pattern of continuous development. And those two features having different stakeholders behind and mapping to different business capabilities, they have different deployability needs. Yet, if you deploy one as part of this large AEM project, I don't want to use the word monolith, but probably that's the right word in this case, you will be deploying the other one irremediably because they're built together and they are deployed together as part of this big system, right? And now in the context of most of our projects, having a couple system that gets a version bump and deploy as part of the same build integration makes sense because there is a lot you can optimize in our context at build time. And when I say optimize, I mean that we have more control of our dependencies, that we can better manage them, that we can share them, that we can make architectural decisions in terms of technology stack that guarantee, particularly in the front end, full cohesion and seamless integration of UI components. And that's obviously an advantage. However, there may be cases when we are working perhaps with third-party providers, when we're working with partners or service providers of our clients, and we have no other way than to integrate these development by these other parties or that code that is not under our control in our system. And those are typically independent pieces with their own independent teams behind and their own independent cycles, and sometimes even deployed to a different origin. And this is when we have to play the micro frontends card. Now, there are several different mechanisms to develop and ship each micro part, if you want. They could be full-fledged micro applications. They could be very, very atomic web components. They could be an ECMAScript module. And there are two factors that determine the best way to integrate them. There are more actually, but these are the two most important. The first one is whether we want to integrate these parts at runtime or at build time. That would come conditioned by how this code or applications are available for distribution. So they could be consumed from a registry such as a NPM or Nexus if they're packaged, or they may be deployed locally or remotely in terms of origin. If we have the source under our control, right, the best option is always to go with build time. So we can optimize shared dependencies, we can execute code splitting, we can do tree shaking, we can remove anything that we don't need or even duplicates. We can avoid collisions, we can avoid to initialize many runtimes that are perhaps using or bootstrapping the same framework. Or also we have the ability to share assets like styles and fonts, for example. At runtime, a new plugin called Module Federation, which is available for Webpack 5 since November last year, may be the solution to request micro frontends from a different origin and still have the ability to share dependencies consumed from a shared scope, right? But this technology is very much bleeding edge and not so mature, and we have to use it with care because there are not so many examples in production that we can rely on if we have problems. But yes, it's a new possibility that is there. There are other non-frontend possibilities to request or to consume micro frontends from different origins, but we're not going to discuss them here. And the second parameter that may influence our decision is precisely the level of encapsulation necessary between all those parts. So we may want to load the micro frontend as a completely isolated single page application in a completely separate document or URL, which is a hyperlinks pattern, or we could integrate an application using an iframe, which we do for a very long time, by the way, or via web components as part of the same document model, or with or without Shadow DOM, by the way, or even as an ECMAScript import via the script tag with the module attribute, which is also not supported by every browser. We have to keep browser support in mind, or directly to our JavaScript files in the form of dynamic imports. Obviously, the higher the level of encapsulation, the less possibility to have the benefit of implementing a shared resources strategy, but the lower the risk in case one of these isolated parts fails. Once we made those two decisions, we need to focus in designing an orchestration strategy and choosing the right tools to make communication, state management, routing, and sharing of common resources, like we mentioned before, and assets possible, and preserve a minimum acceptable performance score. There are some tools out there that are designed precisely with this in mind and make this possible, like, I don't know, for example, MicroSPA, which allows you to blend different frameworks in the same context. Or we can leverage browser inbuilt APIs or event-based patterns like publication subscription systems or modules to share state or communicate between parts. I would like to close this quick high-level overview, stressing that I believe there are some keys to make sure that your implementations of micro frontends are successful. And those keys are usually not technical. They can be defined by a set of principles that need to be understood by everyone and respected by the stakeholders. And some of them are that each micro frontend should map to one and only one business capability or area. For example, imagine you have, I don't know, an authentication and authorization module in your application, and this maps to the accountability of a stakeholder. There should be a team in charge of integration and orchestration who typically will make some decisions in order to preserve and optimize runtime performance and seamless integration. There should be a well-distributed and established documentation strategy to test end-to-end all these microparts as part of the same system. And the concept of independent deployability that we explained in the very beginning, and of failing in isolation is bound to existing style guides and APIs that make coordination and cohesion possible. Now, thank you very much. I will now pass the mic to Vilash so he can make a more practical demonstration. Vilash.
Thanks, Natalia. Yeah, I so basically, micro frontend is one of the quite a buzzing topic at the moment, and I got introduced to this whole new topic when I got involved as part of a POC work, where we had to create 4 to 5 smaller applications which we needed to embed in different platforms. Um, so so basically, we had to host this micro applications and the host page can be in form of AEM or some other platform as well. So that was the first ask as part of the POC. The other ask was in certain cases, this application should also be able to talk to each other to give certain behaviors, right, based on whatever inputs is coming. So we did that in Svelte, and it was quite an interesting exercise to understand like what exactly micro frontend is. Because initial thought was, okay, you are asking about embedded stuff, but isn't iframe the way to go? Like, because that's where our main thinking goes on to. But then when we started working on this with all this micro with web components, um, things started getting into shape, and then so we were able to achieve what we were supposed to in that particular duration. So for today's demo, so I have kind of mimicked a similar demo example. What all topics which I had covered as part of the POC, I am kind of covering it here as this sample demo application. So let me first walk you through the code base first. So here, basically, I just created a mimicked e-commerce application where we have a product catalog component, which basically lists all the set of products, and then a mini cart. So basically, which tells us like which all product have been added to the cart. Now, maybe let's take a quick overlook at what they do. So this is my product catalog. Nothing much, like nothing fancy. Basically, we're just loading a sample product from a JSON file and kind of looping it here. And the other thing which we are doing here is whenever, and there's a button for add to cart. So basically, whenever anyone clicks on it, so we kind of dispatch the event, which is product add to cart. So that's how we are making the component talk to the other component. So we are binding this event against a window object. But this is one of the simple example how you can make the components talk to each other. So you can also start with like a simple example, like just using a common window object, or also maybe take a broader step and make use of web workers in that matter. But so for the sake of the demo, I kind of use custom events. And but yes, so basically when we click on it and we are triggering this event. Now let me also quickly walk you through the mini card. So again, nothing fancy. So basically we are listening to this event over here from bound to the window object, and then listening what is the what is the new product which is getting passed along. And then these are the helper functions, which basically add the product, remove the product, and toggle the card display. So let me quickly start the application. I think I'm in the wrong directory. All right, so let's see. So here we have a simple product catalog component, basically, which just reads from a JSON file, and we're just listing it out. The cart component also has a product tile, which has a corresponding add to cart button to it. Now let's see what the mini cart looks like. Nothing, it's just an icon. When I click on it, and I can see an add to cart panel, basically a panel over here where I can see what all products I have added to the cart. So how I have stitched it together, right? How I am kind of rendering it into the host page. So as part of that, I have created a static HTML file. And so basically we are kind of directly importing this JavaScript. So thankfully, Svelte kind of compiles into the native ESX code. We kind of call it, and then we are using this web component typed in here. Similarly, the same thing is done for the product catalog, where it's hosted in another origin, and then we are kind of calling it here. So maybe let me quickly launch it. There you go. So basically, we have a host page, which now kind of hosts two micro applications, one in the form of product catalog and one in the form of shopping cart. So let's see if it talks to each other. So basically the same rules apply how you make a web components talk to each other. So here we have a product added. Let's add one more. And if you see, the count goes increasing. So now, so this is one of the quick, simplest, or in the POC at least, this was one of the simplest way where we can go ahead and get started with this whole micro application stuff. But isn't it's that simple? No, actually, because in the real world case, it might be much more complicated, where you will have to include this JavaScript as part of your bundle and load it separately. But this is just a simple example at the moment. Now, if you would have noticed, there's another application which we are making use of. So this application, we are making use of the Webpack Web Federation module. So let's see how that works. Maybe I'll do this. So we have another application. So basically, it's just a group of component where we have a banner component, just some random text and a search box. And this is kind of presented as part of AppSwelt. So basically, my apps.svelte imports two components. One is banner and one is search. And we are kind of rendering it as part of the main root component. So how do we import it in our application? So the as part of the Webpack 5 Federation module feature, so we can include this plugin into our Webpack config file, and we have to declare a name. So this whatever name we are declaring it here would get exposed as a global variable in wherever you are consuming this remote entry file. So what's a remote entry file? So basically, when Webpack compiles this bundle, so Webpack creates another container file which exports all these components separately, which allows us to consume it individually as well. Now, what's remote? So let's say that your component is kind of dependent on some other application. So that also you will have to mention it here so that Webpack understand that and download it during the runtime. So what are we exposing so far? So I have two components, like a banner and search, and I'm, for the sake of a quick demo, I also kind of is exposing the whole application as such as part of the app.svelte. So, and we also have to mention Svelte here because Svelte being shared or used for this component. So how do we consume it from the page host level, right? So let's take a moment here. And maybe let me just quickly open this file. So if you notice, so what does this container file mean, right? So basically it maintains a mapping of the components which we are exposing. So what basically it does is whatever we have registered in the Webpack file, like ./app, ./banners, search. So it returns a promise, like how to fetch it dynamically, and there is a particular URL against it. So I'll show you like how the network call is done. So now this remote app, like I mentioned earlier, right? So this remote app gets exposed as part of a global variable into the DOM, and then you can directly use it. So how I am consuming it from the page host level. So let me take a walk down here. So basically I have a function defined where I'm loading this remote entry file on the, like once the page is loaded, and once the script is loaded successfully, so I am using this remote app variable which I had declared earlier in my webpack config file, and then I say that okay, get me search, right? So what does get do here? So the get function basically takes a name, and then it basically calls a module map which returns a promise. And this promise is what we execute. And once we execute it, we get the respective JavaScript. And from that, we kind of instantiate it with the target DOM element. So let's see how it loads into the page host, right? Okay, so I have the search, which is coming from the Webpack related Svelte app, and I have also a banner component which I am loading on the fly. So let's see how it loads on the fly, right? So if I click load this, there you go. So I have just made a request, and what it returns is basically a whole Svelte compiled file, which gives me just a moment, maybe way below. Yeah, there you go. So basically a compiled ESX version of the Svelte file, which directly gets instantiated, and I can see the component over here. So even if I quickly search around, uh, make some searches. So it can. So yeah, so like I said, so basically these are one of the many ways where we can expose it, expose your applications and stuff. So what's different with the Webpack Federation approach is, so that is you can actually import components from altogether a different application, and those components can be exposed separately. So that's one unit thing which everyone's excited about. But like how Natalia mentioned, right, it's quite new and quite niche at the moment. So yeah, so it's very new, and so from production level, I'm not sure like what all the challenges might pop in when we try to adapt this feature. So this is pretty much the demo I had prepped up as part of the micro front end, basically where we are loading a couple of web components, and then we are also loading an ESX module as part of the Webpack Federation config. Now, to conclude from what were my learnings as part of the POCs, right? So like Natalia was mentioning, is it really worth it to go about this whole micro front end approach? So the main essence of micro front end is to it makes sense when your team is able to work on individual aspects separately, and there's a separation of concern or separation of logic where you can separately take care of it and work against it. This is where micro applications, micro front end basically like pitches for. Now, for every application, it might not make sense because there is, because it already makes sense when there are applications with complex logics for the small applications. So e-commerce is one of the popular example where you have cart, you have catalog, or you have got checkout pages where all those components have too much logic, a business logic associated with it. So it always makes sense to split it into different teams and execute it. But for regular team, again, it's a call whether your application is getting that complex at that, like where you have to actually split it and tackle it. Now, the other aspect is um, the communication aspect. Like I mentioned already, that there are basically what all rules apply for the web component, we can adapt to it as part of using custom events or even web workers. But if we don't but then over with course of time, it might get a bit complex if we don't do it properly. And like how Natalia mentioned, there has to be an orchestration layer where there is a dedicated team um, who is making sure that everything is integrated, and like everything is working with agreements with all the other teams. Now, the other popular topic was like how to share states among this different applications. So this would be quite a challenge, considering that micro application or micro front end also means that you can use different front end framework like React and Vue and compose it together and stitch it together to form a certain page, right? So with this, it might get complicated, but then there are already some solutions out there like single spa, which kind of works towards that need. But again, it's a little early, and again, this is something where we have to do our due diligence to fully finalize whether we have to take that approach.
Hi, Vilash. Sorry to interrupt. I think we are over time and we need to wrap up. We have next session after 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So on that note, I'll just conclude with the last topic. That would be the performance topic. So yeah. So definitely, we are kind of splitting down the bundle, and the page load time is improved a lot. But then we should also keep in mind about the layout shift, because here we are again embedding it on the runtime. So this is another area, which basically means that whatever rules apply for the web components also applies over here as well. So on that note, I would conclude.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.